Still kind of dealing with the ramifications of it, but it's
Hmm.
getting better.
Okay. So what kind of accident was it? I mean, you got,
Just a fender bender. Somebody ran into the back of me.
oh, that's bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it ended up being okay, but
Hmm.
still.
Damage to the
Oh,
car too, or just
sorry.
was the car damaged?
Not too bad.
Mhm. Okay, so it's more just that whiplash kind of
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, glad you're doing
Anyway,
better. Yeah.
yeah, thanks. Let's see. So with that, I have not been able to really focus on this the last few weeks. I also have been really busy. I have a thesis defense coming up in a month. And so I have to really focus on that right now as well. So
Hmm.
it's
Okay.
for all of this sports and character development stuff that we're working on. And so I'm defending my thesis for that in, yeah, on October 27th.
Hmm.
So I've been putting a lot of time and effort into that. I'm also working on some papers with Garrett Cardin still. I worked on that a bit last night. Like it's the double empathy problem with autistic and neurotypical people.
Hmm.
So I still have my fingers a little bit in the empathy world, but not as much as I want. I want this to be my focus, but it can't be right now. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't
Working on.
done too much either.
Okay.
Just we've been getting the summits. I had added that extra summit where regular summit was November. I just wanted to get the uh, movement building summit going. So, I've kind of been doing all that and sending out the emails and getting everything, getting the runner show and stuff together. And then, oh, we went to. I'll just show you this to with the empathy tent. We took it out. Uh, they we're out with the empathy tent. There's this, one of these street fairs
Yeah.
in
That's
it's
fun.
in the Bay Area. Salon. It's called El Sobrante. It's near Richmond. It's part of Richmond. And so we're just, offering listening. This woman, for example, was Palestinian. She came by and I said, "Well, we do listening." He says, "Oh, if I started speaking, I'd start crying." I said, "Well, that's what we're here for. Come and sit down." She started talking about what it's like being Palestinian and how kind of the whole world's against you. She grew up here, and she just
Mm.
feels a lot of judgment and stuff. And she just was, kind of tears too, sharing it. But afterwards, she really was grateful, for someone to have listened to her. And then, oops,
Was that Jana?
not Jana, but Ingrid.
Oh, Ingrid. Okay, I knew I
She was just in
recognized
the
her name.
call. So she
Okay, yeah.
was somebody, talking about personal family stuff. And we had multiple, people we listened to. I was listening to somebody else. And just a little bit of a flavor of this whole street fair.
That's
That was
so
kind of
fun.
fun. Yeah. Kind of,
Yeah, I'd love to see one of these in person sometime.
yeah,
I'd
it's
love
really
to
good
do one
way.
in
Mhm.
person. Is that something that I could ever do here?
Yeah.
Like just
If,
pull up a tent and put it at a street fair here?
Yeah, you could start a empathy center chapter there.
That
What
sounds
city
fun.
you're in? What city is that?
I the college is in Provo, Utah.
Provo. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can even do a fundraiser for the tent, and stuff like that. Get people involved and start a little group, an empathy group, and go out and yeah, we um uh you know Lou, he's doing it in he did not yeah, he's doing it in Petaluma, in Marin County, and he's been doing all kinds of different events. He's doing some simple trainings and has kind of community events. People come and talk about all kinds of different community topics. So yeah, but the tent is really it's very up there. You really see it, right? And I mean, thousands of people walk by, so they kind of register it and it just kind of gets the word out. And we had the empathy tent. I mean, the empathy test. I don't know if you saw that, but there's the empathy in the eyes test from Cambridge.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the first 10 of the 36, there's actually printed out, and people come and take the test, like how empathic are you? So people really like that, really draws in a lot of people. So anyway, yeah,
That's
it's a
really
lot of
fun.
fun. It's really good for community building, getting, kind of gear up, maybe go to UC Berkeley, again, I think want to get,
Yeah.
get the
I
students
think that could be
involved.
really beneficial. I'm sure you're aware of the Charlie Kirk assassination
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. That was right here.
Is that your
And
town?
so, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So it's Utah Valley University is like 10 minutes from where
Mhm.
we are. And so I can't even tell you, I mean, how many people were there that I know.
Mhm.
So in our community, there's like a lot of people who are really heated right now, like really, really angry
Mhm.
about what happened. And just on both sides of things, there's a lot of anger. And it's a nationwide thing, but it's also like it's affecting people in my community really personally because either they were there or their family members were there or they were affected in some way personally by it. And so I had a brother who was there, a niece that was there,
Wow.
a neighbor was there, and my other neighbor's daughter was there. Just a lot of people were super affected by it. So I just think that this kind of thing could be really beneficial in my community right now because there's a lot of like animosity
Mhm.
surfacing. I have a friend who runs an organization called Disagree Better, and it's a bipartisan organization here in
Mhm.
Utah. And I want to get connected with her and see what kind of work we could do together because this is something I'm looking at academically right now, and so I'm not as involved in like the community outreach side of it. But I don't want to lose that focus on the actual application part of it. And as you know, I know that we've talked about this
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
many times that
Practical.
I want to keep it practical. So doing something like an empathy tent sometime soon, I think could be really beneficial to help people kind of process what they've experienced. Because there's just a lot of difficult feelings that are being experienced in my community right now. So I'm going to give that some thought and see if I have any time that I could dedicate to that. The thing that's so hard about it is anytime I dedicate to stuff outside of my like paid research time
Mhm.
and my coursework and like working toward my thesis, it's hard to justify it
Yeah.
because it's time that I then take away from my family.
Yeah, you only
Um,
have so much time,
yeah,
the
and that's
limit.
that's the thing. And I wish I didn't need sleep because then I would just do all of these things, right? Because there's so much benefit to what you're doing. And I really value the work that you're doing. I really value helping people talk to each other more effectively. One thing I did forget to mention that I am working on for one of my classes is creating a new empathy scale, which is it's kind of ironic to think of that because I have so many issues with the empathy scales that are out there. And so to just add another scale to it
Mhm.
on the one hand doesn't make sense to just muddy the water more, but on the other hand, I don't want it to be like an affective empathy scale. I want to focus more on this willingness to just actively listen to somebody else's perspective and not assume that you understand their perspective. And so in this scale, I'm calling it the rational empathy scale, kind of a little, not a jab, but like a nod maybe to the rational compassion movement, because they're saying that the answer to the foibles of empathy is this rational compassion.
Mhm.
But my pushback would be that you also have to have a willingness to understand the other person's perspective and not just have compassion for them. So,
Mhm.
rational empathy, the way I see it, is kind of leaving all of the reactivity side of it out of it and just focusing on I am here and I'm ready to listen. Anyway, I would love to send it to you and maybe get some feedback on it,
Yeah.
like items that we have on the scale before we try and validate the scale. But hopefully, it's something that will come back validated and like we'll be able to actually start using it in research. That makes me excited because like I've said, I'm not a big fan of of all of the affective empathy scales that overconflate it, this active listening with like emotion contagion, because I
Hmm.
feel like that ends up being the thing that so many people are saying is the downside of empathy is the emotion contagion. So if we
Yeah.
just leave that out of it completely, like we can say fine, like have the emotion contagion, but we're not going to say that that's part of the same construct that we're talking about here.
Yeah, well, you're
um,
talking about Rogers and his, how he used empathy and he just listened to people and he didn't uh, kind of divide it into affective and cognitive. So
yeah, yeah, because I
that
just
whole
don't really
thing, I don't know how
agree
it got, I
with
don't know how it got so
it.
messed up, but it was pretty clear there. How well do you listen to someone? And there is one test. Are you familiar with the Kharkov trucks uh, test?
uh,
Because that was
I'm
sort of based on Rogers. So
not
they,
sure. Kharkov, Karkoff, maybe.
yeah, let me see. So I think I'd sent you this before. This was an old, I used to put everything. This is the empathy training lit review kind of
Oh
project I
yeah,
did.
it's been a while.
Yeah, and if you go down to measurements,
Oh man, I didn't even know you had that in there. That's super
yeah,
helpful.
I mean this is all the measurements I've come across.
Wow,
So, and
that's a
I can,
lot.
yeah, I
Yeah,
can give you the,
that's more than I have. Wow.
you can
I've
always
seen a
add
lot of
more
those, but
here. And then Kharkov trucks. So check that. Let me put that link in. Stop share. So that's the link to the exam tests that I am familiar with. And then if you go to Kharkov truck scale, so he has well, I can actually share that here. Um, So he was building on Rogers, work. They initially had an 8-point empathy scale. Then they turned into a 5 to simplify it. But, level one was therapist seems completely unaware of even the most conspicuous of the client's feelings. Here's a low level of empathic responding, communicating little or no awareness of understanding the caller's feelings. Respondings are irrelevant or abrasive. Moderate level, interchangeable, reciprocal level, moderately level. So anyway, they kind of break it down. The highest level, reflecting each emotional nuance and using voice and intensity of expression finely tuned to the client's moment to moment experiencing. The volunteer accurately responds to the full range and intensity of the surface and underlying feelings and meanings. So
so would this be like a supervisor that would listen to their interactions and then rate them?
they could. I've heard, Roger. I don't know if it was Rogers did that or somebody did it where they had 10 therapists do listening and they recorded the listening. And then they had I think it was like 40 or 50 therapists or, knowledgeable people give ratings to them
Mm.
and then say, how empathic are they? And I think it's in that he mentions in that paper, empathic and unappreciated way of being. And he said it was like something like two of them were pretty good at listening. Uh, you know, half of them were not very good, and two of them were like terrible. And these are
Mm.
like knowledgeable, therapists, high, probably like Fritz Perls or those type of people. So anyway, he was just kind of saying that therapists themselves are not all that empathic necessarily.
That's interesting because they're really the people that I think of when I think of somebody who's really high in empathy. I often think of a really good therapist. So that's super interesting that that's what they found. The scale that
But
I'm developing is,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask that. What's the scale? How does it kind of relate to this?
It's self-report.
Okay.
So it's for this class that we have to create a self-report measure. So there are other ways of getting at the same thing. I really like the idea of like a 360 degree where it's like you self-report, but then people around you also rate you on it. But that's not what we're doing for this. Do you mind if I share my screen? And I'll
Mm,
share it with you. Let's see.
okay.
Okay, so anytime it says reverse scored, it would be like this is the opposite of what we're looking for. So if somebody disagrees with me, I immediately get defensive. That would be obviously on the low end of empathic. I respect other people's perspectives, even if I disagree. When a discussion becomes emotionally charged, I am able to calm my emotions. So these are kind of looking at this ability to, these first ones are looking at your ability to kind of manage your emotions in the process. When I'm listening to someone, I want them to know that I'm paying attention. Oh, sorry, that we rearranged this differently than I was remembering. So this is kind of like your attitude that you bring to the interaction. The next section is the actual behaviors. I want to understand the perspective of people who are different from me. I am slow to react when someone says something upsetting. So we have 20 items. We're going to whittle it down to 10. But I ask questions when I don't fully understand what someone is telling me. I tend to jump in and solve someone's problems before I fully understand the situation. That's reverse scored again. I tend to interrupt people when they talk, also reverse scored. I am able to quiet my inner voice when I listen to others. I often judge others while they are talking. There, so these end up just being a lot of similar things to this. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts on any of these.
This is sort of a general, um, I mean, it's just in general, people rate themselves, right? Just anyone could take this test.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, so it would be, we would use this in conjunction with maybe another scale to look at outcomes. So for example, if this scale also rates really highly with how connected they feel with other people, then we would know that would tell us that this type of empathy increases people's feelings of connectedness to other people or their ability to solve problems or something like that. So we would never use this by itself. It would be in conjunction with something else to look at the outcomes that would be associated with this.
well, I would think of, I mean, for me, it's like there's the empathy circle. Like, how do you measure the empathy level within the empathy circle?
Mm-hmm.
So I could see something like the Kharkov, test, maybe refined a little bit. Like, as the listener, I mean, you do a round of listen, you listen to the speaker, and then you take a minute to sort of evaluate it, right? That how well do you feel you listened? And then you have kind of a
Mm-hmm.
depth of listening, right? And then the speaker says how well they felt heard, and then the observers rate how did you feel the empathy, what how well did the listening go? So you'd have like a minute between speaking to sort of capture that. So you'd be getting different perspectives
Yeah,
on
I
the
like that.
listening.
Yeah. So
I
this
think
kind of
that'd
scale
be.
here would be
Mhm,
like before.
mhm,
So before they enter the empathy circle, they
yeah.
take this to kind of get a baseline of their level of empathy. And then maybe we'd use something like that during the empathy circle. And then after, maybe they would do another sort of rating of like,
Hmm.
how did I do overall during the circle? The question I have for you about that, what you're saying with that is that sounds similar to the way you described the research that you were going to do with someone a
Yeah.
few years ago. And didn't you say that ended up making it too choppy? It kind of messed with the flow of the empathy circle.
Yeah, theirs was like they were testing everything under the sun. They just had so many tests that it was like crazy, So you want to minimize.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could see like taking, 30 seconds or a minute to make the questions fairly like the Kharkov test is like 5 levels. It could be a bit refined, but once you know what the levels are, you could probably quickly or quickly evaluate it. So,
Yeah,
but
I'm going to grab something to show you really quick. Excuse me. I can't remember who developed this scale, but are you familiar? You're familiar with this, right?
I can't see that one. I don't.
Oh, hang on. I'll stop sharing.
Okay, yeah, it's so small.
Sorry.
Oh, self. So I've seen some of that before. I didn't know it was a test, though.
So it's a pretty commonly used test. It's called the inclusion of the other in the self, and it basically like you could use this in a. It's a very simple visual way to get at how much do you feel like you connected with the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would be
Mm-hmm.
interesting to use something like that to look at like the differences over time throughout the empathy circle. So maybe at the beginning, they say, yeah, I don't know any of these people. So I feel very disconnected from them. But
Mm-hmm.
then maybe by the end, they would be really overlapping. And
Yeah.
so that would give some credence to the idea that when you're engaging in this kind of practice, you are more overlapping with the perspectives of the people that you're talking to.
Yeah, so you're measuring a feeling of connection. Is that?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So a connection that would be interesting. How connected do you feel within the group, or
Mhm.
so you can measure connection in
Yeah, and I
different?
especially like it
Mhm.
because it's circles and
Mhm.
we like circles instead of
Yeah.
triangles
Mhm.
around here.
So it's easy to quickly select it if you have a screen like a extra screen open, right? That you can then just quickly take that test.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so actually, let's see, this was back in May, maybe. Garrett Cardin did this really cool event with he called it an autism story slam, and he had speakers who were autistic, and they shared their experiences with autism. And then after each speaker, so I was in the audience. After each speaker, he had us answer a few questions, and one of them was this: like, how much do you feel like now you understand the perspective of that person? And so he had us do that before,
Mhm.
where I felt like, I mean, I know some autistic people. My nephew is autistic, but I don't really feel like I understand the perspective of somebody who's autistic. And then after they shared their stories, I felt the change within myself. So when I saw that scale again, I was like, absolutely, I feel like our circles are overlapping now
Mhm.
because they shared their story in a way that connected with something inside of me. Um, and so I think that that could be really an effective way to just really quickly and easily get at that kind of overlap without disrupting the flow of the empathy circle too much.
Yeah. So there's measuring the sense. I mean, the question for me would be what's being measured,
Mm-hmm.
and some things to be measured is how um, how did your feelings get seen? Do you feel right? It's like your underlying feelings were they reflected at what level? Like how deep did you
Oh, I
did
like
you
that.
feel hurt?
Yeah.
It's the fear, the anxiety, the feelings of stress, the joy, the so that you could see how deeply you felt hurt, and then also the needs, and uh, and so NVC, the if you're nonviolent communication, what they're saying is you have a feeling like you're angry, right? The person you're listening to someone who's angry. Oh, for example, I listened to the Palestinian woman. She was in grief. She felt sad and in grief, and uh, and then the idea is that behind that there's a feeling that people want, right? She wants inclusion. She wants
Mhm.
connection. She wants to be seen, and they call those needs. And I think that they're separating feelings and needs. I think needs are just feelings that people desire. You want a feeling of fairness, right? That you feel a sense of fairness in terms of time, like everybody's heard, and you feel a sense of fairness. in that, or you feel it's not fair. And if it's not fair, you get angry, right? Like I have anger because I have this desire for this feeling of fairness. And so you can go, there's whole, if you look up NVC, they have a whole bunch of different feeling and needs words. So that could also be measured, right? It's like
Yeah.
how did, did they hear the underlying needs? But people would have to understand what needs are, or what desired feelings, or you could even call them values. Did somebody tap in? But you have to, it's the feeling that's behind the feeling, right? The desired feeling. So I don't know if all this
Yeah,
makes
I like
sense,
that. I
but
like how you're calling it a desired feeling. I hadn't thought about needs in that way, but I think
yeah,
you're really getting at it.
yeah,
Like it's I want to feel safe and right now I don't feel safe
yeah.
and so I feel angry instead.
Yeah, that's one difference I have with the NVC community. They're saying needs or something else or another type of phenomenon, but I think needs are just another type of feeling. So
Hmm.
it's just feelings that we desire. Uh,
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at that. I think that we could design a battery of questions that wouldn't interrupt the flow too much. I'm going to meet with Garrett right after this, actually, and I can ask him exactly which questions because I can't remember. I know it was like 4 or 5 questions. One of them was that overlapping circles. But it was just getting at the same thing, like how well did you understand the perspective? But then obviously for our purposes, it would be different because we would have getting it from the speaker's perspective, how well did you feel heard? And then from the listener's perspective, how well did you listen?
mhm.
And it would be, wow, I can just see so many interesting outcomes from this.
And the
Like,
observers too. You're getting a third.
yeah, and the observers as
Uh-huh.
well.
Yeah.
Because I think that's, like I was saying, that 360
Hmm.
is going to be really, really rich. Like it's going to really provide a lot of depth to our understanding because that scale that I'm creating, that's really thin. It's a depth of like, this is the way I see myself. And that's only one dimension of something that's a lot more complex than that, especially if we're talking about um, like a holistic empathy where there's this feeling of empathy in our group that has to be observed from the different perspectives of the people in the group.
Yeah, and bringing people into the felt experience. Also, it would be interesting is how deeply, as a human being, how deeply were you heard? 1 to 10. It's like 10 is like a peak experience of depth. I'm just
Hmm.
curious, where people would rate that. That feeling when somebody really understands you. I mean, it just feels really good, and you
Yeah.
shared something kind of at the core of your being. Um, so, how that could be sort of.
Yeah, I think that could be really powerful.
So I'm trying to
So
bring it into the empathy circle because
I know,
I
always,
think that's
always. And so, I mean, let's say we were to use some before questions, some during questions, and then after questions. We could have a few different things that we ask before they start the empathy circle. And then during, we wouldn't want to disrupt it too much. So, would you say it's like after each speaker or
Mhm.
after each complete round?
I would say speaker.
Okay.
Because
And
I
so,
think it would be good too to at least start with that because um, then you can start having an evaluation of your listening. 'Cause I don't have outside perspective on how well I'm listening.
hmm,
It's like people say, "Well, I feel heard," and sometimes I can feel I really hear, but I'm really wondering what people's perception is. And I think it could be helpful for the participants in this circle to
yeah.
see that evaluation afterwards. I mean, some people are saying, "Oh, I don't want that because I don't want it." They feel like they're being judged, but I think it could be very, very helpful.
So are you thinking of it in terms of like a mode of actually helping people become more empathic, like the individuals in the circle, it's a
Hmm.
training for them. So by the end, like when we have a debrief, then they
Yeah.
learn from the experience to be more empathic.
And it can have a scientific measurement quality to it. Both. It can do both,
Yeah.
right? You can be gathering, uh, and it could actually be brought into AI too. I wonder, right? I mean, AI does. I mean, it would be for AI to be aware. I'd like to see,
Hmm.
how well reads the feelings that you have, and then how does it get to the feelings that you desire or the needs. So anyway, it overlaps, I think, in a lot of different directions. It's good for
Yeah,
gathering information. It's good for the participants, and it could actually be
good for training.
training AI, for example. I mean, oh, you're going to check with somebody who does AI work.
Oh yeah, that's true. I haven't been thinking about it. So I guess I've been a little bit concerned about reaching out because then it's like, okay, I have to say that I'm actually doing my empathy research again. And I don't know that I'm ready to like jump into that right now until I'm done defending my thesis. Um,
You're defending your thesis,
yeah, so it's not my
oh,
dissertation.
oh, okay,
My
okay,
dissertation is going to be empathy focused, but
mhm,
right now we're working with the sports
mhm.
character development
Okay,
stuff,
got it. Mhm,
and that's what my thesis is about.
mhm.
And so it's, I guess, technically a second year project within the overall context of getting the PhD. So, so honestly, that's what's been holding me back. Is if as soon as I reach out, he's like, "Okay, we're ready to do empathic AI stuff again, right? Like that's what we're doing now."
Right, and you're going to
And
get
he's,
sucked into that.
I know, and so I'm just not ready to fully jump back into that. Because I'm really excited about it and I want to jump back in. And so if I allow myself to enter into conversations about it, I
Yeah.
won't get my thesis done.
I totally get it because there's so many things I'm drawn to, and if as soon as I get into it, it distracts the attention, and I keep trying to rein myself in
Yeah,
too.
I
Yeah,
can see that in you as well.
yeah. I kind of
That's
like to go with what's kind of fun in the moment is the problem, and then I get a lot done in that sense. But then things get kind of not finished. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I struggle with that as well, where I get really excited about certain things, but then when it gets hard, am I willing to push through the difficulty of actually getting it done? So
Mm.
that's what I have to do right now is push through the difficulty of actually finishing my thesis so that I can progress toward my degree. And if I don't do this, then I'm not actually making the progress that I need to. And to a certain extent, I mean, even working with the Empathy Center, it's a side project that's
Mhm.
not helping me toward
Right.
those specific goals. But if I can integrate it into my research,
Yeah.
that's when I can justify the time that I spend on it.
That's what I'm hoping is finding ways to integrate it so it's has does double work for your
Yeah.
research. And I would hope, I keep encouraging the empathy circle if you're doing measurements, to be actually measuring the empathy circle, because I think that's the thing is to popularize that, and the more information we gather, about that, the more we can sort of spread the practice.
Yeah, I agree. I'm meeting with Greg tomorrow and we're going to talk about some research ideas. And I know that I mentioned to you that he and I are thinking of putting together a study with you. And so I want to get a feel from him as to how much time he could devote to it. And then, to be honest, I am kind of my idea for my dissertation is kind of it's not in shambles right now, but it is needing some major revisions. And so I've put that on the back burner until I'm done with my thesis. I may want to just have this research be my dissertation. I'm not sure though.
Mhm. I would
Um,
hope so. I would. That's
like that would be great. That would be
yeah. Then
great.
we kind of more aligned in terms of yeah. Well, the
Yeah.
thing with
And
the
I
with
could
the
justify
empathy,
the time I spend working
yeah.
on this more as
Well, with
well.
the empathy circle, I see the empathy circle. I mean, it overlaps with the research and it overlaps with the definition. So it is a complete sort of whole in that sense. I find because the empathy circle creates the foundation for I think a practical definition, of empathy, and then it's measuring, right? So within the terms of the test, you can measure other oriented, basic empathy towards the other person. There's a measurement of your self empathy. How well were you able to listen to yourself? Did hearing other people hearing you, what level, how much did that, help you to listen to yourself? And then you also have the empathy level of the group, like how empathic was your group as a whole, holistic empathy. And then, I imagine if empathy would be a little harder, but we've been doing in the afternoons, Lou's been leading a conflict restorative circle workshop, with our group. And that we use the restorative empathy or restorative empathy circle, or restorative circle process. So it's more layers on top of the empathy circles for how you deal with conflict. Because the more conflict, the higher the level of conflict, the more sort of tools you need. They build on the basic empathy circle practice. And I can't remember where I was going with that, but it was,
Well, can I ask a follow-up question to
yeah.
it? Would you want to do any sort of research on how effective that conflict resolution empathy circle is, or would you want to keep it with the more basic level?
I would say start with the basic, have a good foundation, then from there it can build, in terms of if it's a good body of, measurements with a basic empathy circle, you can kind of expand. With the restorative empathy circle, I don't know if I've talked about it before, but
You have. I don't know a lot of
yeah.
details about it, but I know you've mentioned it.
Yeah, in short, is you have a facilitator who leads someone through. Someone says, "I have a conflict. I want to address the conflict," and they come to a facilitator who does the process. The facilitator listens, actively listens to the person who has the conflict. Does active listening, for half an hour or maybe an hour. Here's sort of the scope of the conflict,
Mhm.
and then explains to the person, and then they kind of note like what is an action, some kind of an action that happened, like you know somebody turned and they said something to someone else, and that's like an action. And like just that observational action has a lot of meaning to it, like people got upset by it and all kinds of stuff happened, that becomes the act. And then the person who's bringing the conflict, they say, I would like X, Y, and Z people in the circle. So the facilitator goes to them, to the three other people, and said, oh, so and so would like you in this process. They have this act, this thing happened. Tell me what your thoughts, feelings and thoughts are about it. And you actively listen to them, for so that they feel heard. Just after active listening, you explain the process, and then each of them can invite other people to the process too. So you could do it, for example, with this that your family situation, the extended with the killings and whatever, and then you and then each person who's invited, they get empathically listened to. Plus, they can invite who they think needs to be in the process until you get the full group. Everybody who needs to be in the circle can be there. So it can be, 4, 5, 10 people, even
Hmm.
more. It could be in the circle. And then you use the empathic listening, process, the dialogue. But you go through three questions. The first question is, how do you feel now about the action that happened? And for example, in the family situation would have been, somebody killed somebody. How do you feel about that now in the moment? And people talk about and explore their present feelings. And then once people have sort of understood each other about how they presently feel, they go and they talk about the next question is, what were you feeling? What was when this act happened, when this thing happened, you became aware of it. And so you kind of explore the experience from the past in the moment, and then people start understanding each other. And then it's like, well, what would you like to do now? What would you like to offer? What would you like to request from other people? And then people say, well, I would like this to happen, and I request that you meet me every week, for an empathy circle or a dialogue or something, or that you fix this or something. You make all kinds of requests, and then offers, and people sort of negotiate, and they come up with an actual to-do list that's a tangible set of actions, and you make it as specific as possible. And then people actually do the process. They do the to-do list, and then they have maybe a follow-up circle afterwards to talk about how things went. And so it's quite an extensive process, but its core, this is based on restorative circles by a guy named Dominic Barter. And then I've also done, community mediation workshops. They have like, community 40-hour mediation workshops that kind of work on the same arc. People get heard, they use a lot of active listening. People come to agreements, they create a list of agreements, and then, so it's a very common conflict mediation arc. So, but
Um,
if you've
so
learned, I'll
can
just
I,
finish it. If you
yeah,
have
go ahead.
learned the empathy circle before the conflict, you already have a whole tool set, maybe to head off conflicts, or when you do one of these restorative circles, that you'll be halfway there already because of your experience with the empathy circle.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea so much. I have a friend, a colleague that I work with that is a mediator.
Oh, okay.
And
Mhm.
so the question that I had for you is like, and you kind of addressed this, but how does this differ from the typical mediation route? And like if somebody is a certified mediator, how does that differ in terms of like their road to get to being a mediator from this facilitator role? And like also from the perspective of if you have a conflict, who would you choose to go to? And like, why would you choose to go to a facilitator of a restorative circle rather than to a mediator? So I guess
Well,
that's three that
we have our training. You're coming into the, we have our empathy circle facilitator training. There's been some conflict in that. So we're setting up the structure that if you take the training and there's conflict and you're requested to attend a circle, restorative circle, and you don't, you can not be part of the training anymore. So it becomes like a agreement that if there's a conflict, we're willing to do this. And if there's a conflict, you can contact one of the board members to initiate this process. So within our community, we're having that process. And if you're sort of community, mediation, right now we have in Berkeley, there's a community mediation center you can go to, and they don't do the restorative empathy sort of, they just have their own mediation process. But so we can, promote this process in the long term, but it's not
but
that
it's
well
at
known.
this point it's more on a volunteer like nonprofit basis, or there are there people who could in the future, like could somebody be a professional facilitator
Oh
and
yeah.
like work for a court
Mhm.
system?
Yeah, they do
um,
that. Yeah. Uh-huh. But not for, I think they do more of the standard community mediation, which is, there's a facilitator, mediator, the parties come, and there's different processes. There's a lot of different processes that different facility mediators do. They might do a business mediators or, so there's a lot of different forms of mediation. I think, don't you have a marriage family therapy? Did you? I saw in your bio at one point, do you do MFP or
no,
therapy?
no, I don't. I mean, I go to therapy,
Oh,
but
okay.
I'm not a
Uh-huh.
therapist.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure
I don't know where I saw that. Maybe I have
what was it
somebody
that you would
else.
have seen that would have thought made you think that. I did write a book about like family dynamics,
Hmm.
emotional intelligence, but yeah, like family training, like parenting trainings, that kind of
Oh,
thing. But
okay. Hmm.
it wasn't like conflict resolution.
Oh, okay. Well, there's family therapy, yeah, or couples therapy, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So this kind of practice could be really valuable in hundreds of different contexts. So I see a lot of benefit there. It'd be cool to see it get more traction and have more people seeing the value of it so that they can implement it into their family
yeah,
therapy sessions or, in mediation circles, things like that. That's interesting. So I mean, I have a lot to think about right now with regards to my research moving forward. Because when it comes to choosing which projects I want to focus in on, it's more it's like it's about telling a story of like these are the things that I am focusing on moving forward. So I'm thinking about this in terms of like when I want to get a job in the future after I get my PhD, like if I want to go apply
Mm,
for a faculty position, um, what are they going to see that my story is for what I bring? And so I think that this idea of doing some in-depth research on the empathy circle, it sounds incredibly intriguing to me. So I'm going to give it some thought and look back at my I mean I have the whole thing planned out, very detailed planned out for this other project,
mhm,
right? With the if you remember the circle that I have with like the X and Y axis with,
mhm,
conviction to values and perspective taking. But it's that is kind of like I said, it's not completely falling apart, but it just has some major holes that need filling right now. And now that I've filled some of the holes, I'm exposing new holes, and it's just kind of it's not working the way I want it to. And so I really like this idea because it seems like there's a need for it, first of all, because there isn't any published academic research on it yet. And it's a practice that you have seen anecdotally is so powerful and it's changed a lot of lives, but there's no like empirical evidence of that
mhm,
yet. And so I can see it being really like an obvious choice, like just slide right in there and like take this opportunity. So
mm.
I'm going to give it some serious thought.
Okay.
Um, and like I said before, I love the idea of looking at it from the different perspectives as well, rather than it just being like the individual perspective, like getting the perspectives of the whole group and like the speaker, the listener, and the silent listeners. So yeah, in a lot of ways it aligns with the kind of work that I want to do. So
Yeah, and you
um
have, I'm glad to, work with you, on it, and you have our whole empathy community, people would be glad to
yeah,
support it. So you have and then also as part of the empathy movement, you're going to be speaking at I guess on the definitions. It's only 15 minutes, so it shouldn't be take
yeah.
too
I mean, how do you how do you condense what we've talked about over the
long.
last 10 months into 15 minutes? But
But we have four more scheduled for next year. So every 4 months will be a empathy summit on the, empathy, building the empathy movement. So I mean, so there's a whole movement. But so
mhm.
the and with
Yeah,
the
and
goal
so
of
it makes
make.
sense. It
Mhm.
makes sense to use this as my research as well. So I'm going to talk to Greg tomorrow, like I said, get some thoughts from him. I would love to know from you if it seems to make more sense to you to tap into the existing network of people who come to the empathy circles to have them be the participants of the research, or recruit like locally here on my campus and at Greg's campus. Like we could have two different sites where we have people come into a room together, like this actual room
Mhm.
that I'm in could
Oh,
be
uh-huh.
where we would have like people sitting around that table right there. And then we could have, a device for each one of them to fill out like at the end of each speaking cycle, they like have a tablet and they answer their 5 questions. Or so what I guess the question is, does it make there are 3 different options that I'm thinking of. Number one is tapping into your existing network. The downside I see of that is that these are all people who already know the value of empathy circles. So it wouldn't be an unbiased
Mhm.
sample, right? Because these are people who are already part of your network. The second option would be 2 different sites, maybe one site. If it's just for my dissertation, let's be honest, it might have to be, I might have to simplify it and just bring people here on BYU campus. Or the third option would be to get like a nationally representative sample from like there are different data banks that you can go to recruit volunteer like people who get paid to do this kind of research study. And like so I would need to get a grant for that to be able to pay people for it. And so the upside of that is it's representative of the national population, and so we would get a wide variety of people. The downside is just the logistics of it, the logistics of getting those people integrated into the system and then having them actually show up for a Zoom call, and then like connecting that back with their research account over on Cloud Research. And there it would just be a lot of different parts that we would have to integrate. So
Mhm.
there are pros and cons of all 3 options. Do you have a preference for which would work best for
Glad
you?
to help out with anyone that you think anyone that works. Any project. I like online because people can have their screens up, and
Mhm.
that it probably make it easy for. Um, but yeah, whatever. What can also come to our board and kind of present too, and kind of have the whole group sort of brainstorm on it as
Okay,
well.
I like that
There's
idea.
another aspect is this is Lou's group, the Petaluma Conversations. He doesn't call it the empathy circle, but he's using the empathy circle, process. So they're doing community. It's kind of what we were talking about, right? Doing community groups. So it could be you could be addressing community polarization or something, to add some excitement, to it. Like, how are you bringing the community together? So that's like
Yeah,
another thought of sort of bridging the polarization in the country. So
true.
you're kind of adding that layer to it.
Yeah, and that's very timely as well. Um, and gosh, that actually makes me think of doing it in person,
Hmm.
because my community is kind of at the epicenter of a lot of that polarization right now. Oh, timing is always a problem because like we're at the planning stage, it's like months and months away from actually getting these
Hmm.
conversations running, and then things change, like the political instability is all over the place right now, right? And so um like with my other study, that's another problem that I have with it is I wanted to have people discuss DEI that has been defunded, but that's now kind of old news.
Hmm.
We're like on to bigger problems now, right? And so when I was planning it, it was very salient. It was a big deal back in January, and now that we're on to other things, it's kind of like, oh, that's a thing of the past. Like, why are we even discussing it anymore?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
polarization is ongoing, and
yeah,
looks like we're
it
going to be
always
having
will
that
be,
for, yeah, yeah.
and it's just getting worse. I don't see that getting
No,
better.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think that this could be really good timing. And so I'll think about it. I'll talk to Greg about it because we talked about maybe doing it at two different sites, and
Hmm.
that would give us more of a diversity in our sample.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like having two different samples, I think would be good. But for the sake of simplicity, just doing it at one site obviously is simpler because then I could just run it here. But online has its benefits because then we get people from all over. So
Can do
anyway,
both, some of both.
yeah, we can.
You
We can.
can kind of experiment, do some tests, see what works, you know.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We could
Uh,
just actually do a pilot round of both
mm,
options. Like do one online, maybe even with just members of your community. Just anybody can volunteer, and then they just, they have the questions that they answer um during the empathy circle, see, and we can get some feedback on how well that worked. I can bring four people here into the lab and get some feedback from them as well. And we can choose from there which one would be the best way to move forward. Um, I would want to get obviously as large a sample of people as possible. Um, Anybody in your community, since it's research, we would want to pay them. And so that would require, I would need to get a grant for that. Like we could probably even work on that together,
yeah.
to get a grant funded. There are a lot of different research grants that we can apply for. If it were here on campus, the upside of doing it with a student population is that they have requirements for their classes. And so what they get out of it isn't money, it's credit for their classes. And so it's easier to do that kind of research because you don't have to pay people. So, but again, the
Yeah.
downside is it's more of a homogenous group of people where they're all college students. Here at my university, they're 98% the same religion. There's a lot of white people here. So it's not a diverse population. And so it's harder to say this will work in other places as well. So
Could
they're
do
just,
both, because having young people do it would be great too, just to see the effect. And, uh,
so most of the people in your community are older. Oh,
yeah. It's
I'm
because
not
of
moving
fun.
enough. The lights just went off. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, it tends to be older people. people, especially people who are sort of running it, it's more retired because we haven't been able to create a real funding process. So, I mean, there's been a lot of younger people who they'd love to do this full time, but it's been the funding problem.
Yeah.
Because we do everything kind of for free. So,
Yeah. That's always the problem is funding.
yeah, I did put in a link to the community. I think did I put it in the right place? Is it in the chat? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I see
the
that
first one
it's
is
restorative equity.
Lou's community. So you can see that's like you could be overlapping. Maybe you do it at the campus, but you can bring in people from the community, right? So all
Oh,
ages,
okay.
right? And that's sort of a model of how he's done it. He's brought in like 30 people come to an empathy circle, and he's been building a whole community there. And there's people are starting to reach out to him, different communities, different organizations said, "Hey, we need these skills," So,
Hmm.
and
That's
the
cool.
second,
So
Mhm.
could it be a
Oh, go
matter
ahead.
of like tapping into existing groups
Yeah,
like we have
exactly.
a community, he's building a
Mhm.
community, and we could recruit people like in those physical locations as well, and have like we could say if you want to be part of this research study as part of the empathy circle tonight,
Mhm.
you get paid $10 or whatever. And then we just need you to fill out these things.
Yeah, that group. You mentioned someone who was doing some kind of a bridging type of work. Your
Mm-hmm.
friend, so they
Yeah,
could
so I could
kind of
reach out
be,
to her community as well.
yeah. So you might even be in terms of bringing in people. You might be able to bring in those people. The second link is a little bit about the restorative empathy circle, and it was a conflict that I mediated. I don't know if I'd shown you that before, but that's the pre-circles are recorded.
Hmm.
You can actually see recordings of I don't know about 6 or 7 people who were in a conflict, and XR is the Extinction Rebellion, so it's an environmental group, and they're in Santa Cruz, and they were having conflict, and I said I would help mediate it, and if they would allow it to be recorded. But turned
Hmm.
out they didn't record the circle itself, but the pre-circles. We have a bunch of
Oh,
recordings.
okay. That is interesting. Yeah, if I were them, I would feel uncomfortable with the whole thing being recorded and put on the internet as well because it's pretty sensitive, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I'm really wanting um, that kind of energy, to model it, to actually show how it works was really helpful.
That's really cool. Hey, I've got to go because I have to go meet
Okay.
with Garrett right now. So I'm going to ask him about which measures he used throughout that story slam. And I'm going to talk to Greg tomorrow about some of these ideas. We're also thinking of some other projects as well. So, but I will bring this up. And yeah, we'll talk next week.
Okay. See you
Oh,
next
in
same
two
time.
weeks.
2
Sorry,
weeks.
sorry, in two
Okay.
weeks. Yeah.
All
So it's
right.
going to be every other week at this point.
Okay. See you then.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.